As a possible trade war looms over Canada and the United States, Canadians and Americans alike face further uncertainty. U.S. President Donald Trump is likely to make good on his promise to impose stiff tariffs on Canadian goods imported into the U.S. And to talk more about this is our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, who joins us from Los Angeles. Lisa, the latest Canadian commodity that faces the threat of 25% tariffs is our country's lumber. Now, as a Los Angeles resident, how do you see this threat living so close to residents who are working to rebuild their homes following devastating wildfires in your area?
Yeah, there's a debate. Look, it's like everything else that Donald Trump puts forth, right? What those who love him understand that this is, what he's attempting to do, or will try to at least, try to make sense of it. And then those who are against it, it becomes even a bigger issue than it really is. Let's break it down. So for Donald Trump, this is, he's a businessman. This is how he believes he will get certain behaviors from friends and adversaries alike, right? So with dealing with Mexico in our southern border, Canada in our northern border, he feels as though in the first couple of weeks, I'm not speaking for him, an observation is that, in the first couple of weeks, he got some things done. He got Canada and Mexico both to be much more participatory in keeping the borders safe. And that's a goal, obviously, of the United States, to keep our national security, or at least observe it much more, and to bring Canada and Mexico in, because all three will benefit from that. With regards to tariffs, now I actually spent the weekend at a conference that is basically capitalism first kind of thing. And there was a lot of debate among people who study this day in and day out. And of course, they're anti-tariff. That is not the way to keep markets free and flowing and organic, obviously. But when it comes to leveraging what the United States can do, some see it as that stepping stone. Now, should this be an all-out tariff war, that is probably not the goal that Donald Trump has in mind. But to your point, will he keep his word? I do believe that he will. He did it before with China as well. But the goal being that he won't have to go that far. One thing that I do appreciate, being a student of foreign policy and that being my arena, is that Donald Trump as a leader, and I know this doesn't benefit the Canadians, but as a leader, when dealing with our friends and enemies alike, I do think that it is he does negotiate from a place of strength when he does leave all options on the table. So when you deal with the Canadians or the Mexicans, or on the other end of that spectrum with the Chinese or Iran's regime that are actual adversaries, when all options are on the table, he believes that he will get better results that way with regards to behavioral changes.
And many Canadian leaders, including Alberta's Premier Danielle Smith, have made some progress in helping wane off these tariff threats from becoming a reality. So as an American, how do you see it? Is Canada doing enough?
Well, it looks like we're going in the right direction. I think that is actually the goal, for Canada not to sit across the table from the United States in a tariff war, but to sit side by side and to do things together with regards to the economy and trade, and obviously with national security and keeping the border safe. So I do think the ultimate goal is to have both sides benefit from both the trade and security. But I think that the initial growing pains, if you will, of this are the optics don't look good, right? Donald Trump comes in, he wants to make Canada the 51st state. And, he does give a lot of fodder to the enemies. But if we step back and look at really the ultimate goal, and I'm not saying that we're going to get there, we may not, but I think that that's the intended goal, is to work side by side with our neighbors.
And French President Emmanuel Macron met with President Trump this morning, and this meeting comes after Macron called for an emergency gathering of world leaders after the Trump administration excluded Europe from sitting at the negotiating table to settle the war between Ukraine and Russia. What's the latest?
Look, Donald Trump came into his presidency having, vowed to end all these senseless wars, obviously, Russia's invasion of Ukraine being one of them. Now, the way that he's gone about that is to really isolate each one and to deal, separately, to meet with Putin, tell him this is XYZ is what you're getting, and to bring him on board. And it looks like Putin is coming around. And then on the other end, to really alienate Zelensky and Ukraine and to say, you know what, this is your best bet ever. You have to, get what you get and not get upset, what we tell our toddlers, right? The Europeans, on the other hand, are very much feeling left out of all of this. Donald Trump is going at this, alone. Macron, for his part, has tried before to intervene and be some sort of moderator. Remember the optics of him sitting across the table, a very, very long table from Putin, and trying to do that to no avail. So now emergency meeting has been called. He went to the White House early this morning to try to at least get a piece of the pie, or at least figure out what's going on, or make himself relevant in this arena.
And 2 explosive projectiles reportedly were detonated near the Russian consulate in Marseille, France. A third soda bottle thrown over the perimeter wall of the facility reportedly failed to explode. And officials are labeling this as a terrorist attack?
Yeah, it's already being called a terror attack. This is on the anniversary, again, of the war beginning with Russia invading Ukraine. And it's happening in France, which is an interesting place since we just talked about the French leader meeting with Donald Trump, and again, inserting himself in this, in potential ceasefire talks between Russia and Ukraine. But, there's a lot of people, and I have spoken to people over the last week who are very much upset about how this is going down, and they feel as though Ukraine is being trampled upon once again. I do want to say, regardless of how the ceasefire is going about, I think the priority is that we do get a ceasefire and that we do end this very, very senseless war. I do not believe that Putin is being empowered by this deal. I think that the goal, again, is to end this and then deal with the consequences going forward. But there's no way to reverse what has happened. I don't think you can get Putin out of Ukraine for the 20% that he is occupying right now. And the best bet for both sides is for this to end, for there to be no more casualties. And I know both sides have suffered tremendously. And I hope that the Ukrainians, just like the Russians, would want to end this as soon as possible.
And as you mentioned earlier, we're now at the 3rd anniversary since the Russia-Ukraine war broke out. Leaders from the European Union and Canada gathered in Ukraine's capital to mark the event. There was no representative from the United States at the meeting, however. This comes amid growing uncertainty over Washington's support for Kyiv. Meanwhile, President Trump says the talks he's had with Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky have not been fruitful.
Yeah, look, Zelensky does feel as though he's getting the short end of the stick. He doesn't believe that he has the United States' support. But we have to also juxtapose that with what he was getting from the Biden administration to really, come into Washington, D.C., be given that royal treatment, have the red carpet rolled out for him, and then to come and to shame Congress to give him more and more and more money. And he was given so much money and weapons and such. And look, this, to what end, right? To what end? And I think a lot of common sense foreign policy people like myself, it's not that we want Russia to win this war, it's that we want this war to end. And it doesn't look like there will be any sort of more positive outcome than today. Every day that goes by will be worse for Ukraine and for Russia, for that matter, in the sense that, they've lost, I think over 100,000, soldiers in that war. And of course, they have a larger population, but we're dealing with a madman. And I don't think that Donald Trump has really forgotten that. I think that he is dealing with him in a certain way because he is a madman. And I don't think that this is, this shows any sort of trampling of Kyiv, just that this is the way it needs to end, and it does need to end. And we shall see. I think that Zelensky needs to play along if he wants this to end, and this is not the time to flex muscles. I don't think that this war, if it can again benefit Ukraine in a way that Zelensky would be happy. He cannot win this war, and that's really the bottom line here.
Now, turning our eyes over to the Middle East, Hamas has released 6 more hostages in exchange for more than 600 Palestinian prisoners as part of their ceasefire deal. Now, Lisa, 6 for 600 sounds like a very one-sided deal. How do you see it?
It's not just that. It's not just 6 for 600. 600 among them deadly terrorists who have, tremendous blood on their hands. If you read the specific stories of some of these terrorists and what they have done, people they have killed, children, stabbings, bombings, and to exchange them for 6 civilians. If you look at these young people who were just taken, many of them from a concert, a peace concert, by the way. Yes, obviously, very, very, very lopsided deal, but that just goes to show you how Israel is very much going to do what they can to save even one life, and that is how they value life. And then you look at suicide bombers and the culture of death and the parades when they give back these soldiers, or when they give back the hostages, or when they gave back the coffin of dead babies, how they come to watch, and thousands gather with their young children to again indoctrinate and radicalize, and to show that this is what we applaud. Just over the weekend, I also want to add the Beavis family. That was a development where those 2 redheaded children that we have seen many pictures of throughout the last year and a half since this war began. It turns out that they were not only brutally kidnapped and tortured along with their mother, they were murdered by bare hands, by the terrorists' bare hands. And that's really not an image anyone can get out of their minds. I think those children will become really the faces of this war. And yet you don't hear any global outrage for the way that these children were barbarically killed, and how this war continues in that way. And their mother, it was like a bait and switch. They returned the wrong coffin, and she wasn't even in there. You think about that father that has to go on living without his wife and 2 young children. It's horrific. And the fact that you're dealing with a terror organization that celebrates all of this, that celebrates bloodshed and celebrates terrorism, and how they radicalize their population. It's really a very uphill battle for the entire world. This is not just about Jews, and I think that's a point to very much drive home here. Over the last week, we also heard about 70 Christians being beheaded in the Congo by another terror organization. It's horrific. It's a global crisis that has to be fought. And unfortunately, many of that, or that ideology, and many of these useful idiots who follow and support that ideology are here in Canada and the United States, and really cheering on Hamas and Hezbollah on our very streets and on our campuses. So this is a much broader war that's made its way here to the West. And I think it's something that people have to focus on, beyond the war that's going on in the Middle East.
And President Donald Trump's envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, said on Sunday that he would aim to negotiate an extension of Phase 1 of the Israel-Hamas hostage release and ceasefire deal when he returns to the region. So how will he go about accomplishing that? And is there any hope that he can maybe even out some of the lopsidedness of this deal?
Well, let's see, because look, Naveen, the problem is that we should not negotiate with terrorists. The Trump administration came in on the 1 yard line already, being in talks with Hamas. The Biden administration before them, going to Qatar many times, sitting down with Hamas, trying to come out with a ceasefire or some sort of hostage deal, to no avail. We shouldn't be sitting across the table from Hamas, because the only language that a terror organization understands is force, and that's very unfortunate, because Israel's in a very difficult and challenging position trying to get those hostages back alive. And it's very difficult to go in with force when you're trying to really tweeze out 30 or so, that's how many hostages they believe to be alive, in a population where they're underground and in tunnels, and being hidden all over the place. So in Witkoff's position, he will try to go back and negotiate something better, because Hamas not only has not kept up with its promises, the way that they're going about it is just horrific. And I think he'll need this extension, because the initial ceasefire deal was supposed to be a phase out process. And as time goes on, the chance that those hostages are alive, or not being further tortured and brutally just, it's just horrific the way that they're being abused, the stories that are coming out. So time is of the essence, and I think that it is smart for Witkoff to go back to the table and remind Hamas where the United States stands and how we stand behind our ally Israel. I think that is a very, very strong position. That is a pivot from what we saw with the Biden administration, because even though they did support Israel, there was some daylight, and there was some hesitation, and there were some weapons that were withheld, and some intelligence that was withheld. So I think this is a very strong, it's a stronger position, and it will hopefully benefit the situation.
And Pope Francis has entered his 10th day in hospital, but the 88-year-old pontiff remains in critical condition, and some tests show some early signs of kidney failure. There's prayer services being held around the world. Should the Catholic Church be concerned over what some believe to be a dying pope?
Yeah, it looks like that's the way this is headed. No one wants to see, bad news about anyone, particularly the Pope. It looks like it is kidney failure at this point, and that is never a positive prognosis for anyone. So obviously, prayers all around the world, and we will keep our eyes on this story.
She is our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari. Lisa, thank you so much for your time today.
My pleasure. Thank you.